Do in your 20s when no one else is doing, do in your 30s when no one else is doing. That way your 40s and 50s will thank you. If you don't know how much you weigh, how can you say, oh, I need to lose 10 pounds or I need to, gain more muscle? You have to have a starting point. And understanding if you have everything listed down of all of your responsibilities, all of your debt, all your expenses, then you can say, okay, this is going to take me 10, 15 years, right? If you have student debt.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to a brand new edition of the None of Your Business podcast. And today we're going to get you financially straight, financially savvy. For any of you that struggle with mindset, but also strategies and tactics around money. And I know that depending on where you are on your entrepreneurial journey, you may have learned these lessons the hard way. You also may be learning the lessons currently, or you also just might not know what you don't know. You might be sitting in a space where you're trying to sort this all out. And so we thought none better than Natalie Torres-Haddad to come on the show and help us to get financially savvy. You are known as the Financially Savvy Latina. Everybody's got to check you out. How can they find you on Instagram?
Yes, everything is Savvy Latina, FISAVVY. That's who I am.
All right, let's talk about becoming financially savvy. First of all, though, how did you get into this whole realm of helping other people tackle their finances? Was it something that you lived through yourself?
Yes, definitely. And I always tell people I feel like I'm still always becoming savvy because you said it, you don't know what you don't know. And as you evolve, as you make more money, as you make mistakes, things change all the time. So it's always an ongoing thing. And for me, I grew up in Inglewood, California. So where we are is kind of amazing to see how much has changed in these past 40 years. But I grew up around poverty. I grew up around seeing the lack of resources, not just financial, but injustices that I saw. And so I thought, well, money is power. And this is what we've heard often. And how do we manage that if we don't even have it? And so went to school. My degrees were in finance. I'm a first generation college grad. And, that's kind of the story we're told, like go to college but then you graduate with debt, especially if you're paying for it. And so along the way, I wanted to not only learn how to pay it down, but make enough money to be able to live the lifestyle that I wanted for myself. It wasn't necessarily the richest, but it was to have enough to be, okay, you know what? I don't have to work every day the way I've been seeing everyone struggle, living paycheck to paycheck. So that made the difference.
Well, something was interesting. You said as being young, you thought money is power. A lot of people don't think that. A lot of people, when they're young, are taught money is bad. Oh, look at people that have money. They probably cheated. They probably did bad things to get money. Money doesn't grow on trees. Money is scarce. Oh, Natalie, you can't have that, right? All of that. That's interesting that you had that mindset. How important do you think our mindset programming is when we are young relative to how we're going to face money later in life?
Extremely. And I'll tell you exactly, I knew when I wanted to change my financial mindset. It was right after the Rodney King riots. It was actually, for us, it was an uprising, but I was a little kid. I was barely 11. And I remember seeing one of my neighbors going to a food bank because our city had really been torn. Some businesses burnt to the ground, literally. And I thought, how do we, if you can't even pay for your groceries, how do we expect to come up, right? And
when you were 11, you thought
I was 11, yeah, because I saw my neighbor who was this grown man, very proud, and I was working at the food bank because we were supposed to volunteer. And the religious background is like, oh, money's the root of all evil, but money you can help people with. And so when I saw that, I remember thinking, I either have to go to college because apparently that's going to give me the education to get the job, to get the career in order to be able to help my community. But I was also surrounded in a neighborhood where a lot of gangs, obviously. And sometimes you would hear, oh, well, if they have the money, they control the rules or they control what needs to work. And I thought, well, can't we do good if we have money? And absolutely we can. So it's been an ongoing journey. And just recently, I think, within the last 10 years, seeing how much our city has changed, that's something that really made me feel good that I knew that was part of my mission. And the fact that I was that young and I saw it, I knew that I could do good. I figured if we're good people, you're going to do good things. The more money you have, the more you can help people with that.
So if we have the right mindset, number one, we've got to get to that space. And then you pursued education. And a lot of people pursue education. A lot of people today are saying, I'm going to forego education because I see through the internet, through being an influencer, all these things, maybe I don't need that. But no matter what, it takes money to make money. And so whether you're paying for education or you need some video equipment or whatever it is, people tend to find ourselves in debt. And then debt can be drowning. Like debt, I think money is great. And I think that debt can be great. Debt can be used as a tool. But for a lot of people, debt is actually like the boogeyman. Debt is the thing that has a hold of them. Let's talk first about the mindset around debt. Is debt bad? And if it's not bad, what isn't? How should we change our minds?
That's such a great topic because there's good debt and there's bad debt. And I think also sometimes culturally that plays a mindset. I know I'm, being Latina, we were told no debt, don't get credit cards, don't overextend yourself. But when we start to really learn what good debt is, we can leverage that to get the loans that we need. If we don't have some form of like, hey, yes, I borrowed money, I paid it back, or I am paying it back, how do I expect someone else to take my word for it? And I come across so many people that say like, oh, I have no debt, everything's cash. And I go, but can you grab that loan? Can you actually apply for that loan if there's nothing to show for it, right? So it's understanding the difference between the good and the bad. And you kind of going back to the mindset part is how disciplined are you too, right? I think everyone has to put up the mirror in their face and say like, okay, am I going to be disciplined enough to use that credit card and not max it out, to use it within hopefully under 30%, and say, okay, these are the things that are going to help me not only establish my credit, establish my mindset. So when I do get that bigger loan, it won't be as scary. And I always think about my first rental property. I remember I was like, oh my gosh, I'm, $60,000, which long 20 years ago or so was a lot of money back then. And then, jumping to 250 to $500,000, you start thinking about what a difference is, and you have to start somewhere. So the understanding that debt isn't evil, it's how you use it, and how long you're going to have it, right? And I think that's something that I think is an important topic, especially when we have people going to school and having to fund that themselves. Well, how realistic are you about getting that paid? And I believe with what you said about, it depends where you're going for that education, whether it's investing in your business. For me, going to college, I got connected with people that I would have never met literally from where I come from. I mean, some of the organizations and sororities I was part of, I'm like, there's no way I would have met the future third CEO, from that family that's had money. And so just kind of those things really did change my mindset. So debt is not completely bad. It's how you use it as well.
Okay, so let's talk specifically about one. Let's not talk about how you use it yet. Let's talk about bad debt. Because I'm sure that's probably the gateway, the entry point to how people find you, how people begin to interface with you, is because they've taken on a lot of bad debt.
Yeah.
Now they're drowning. You do a lot of talks about helping people to navigate that. What are some good suggestions? What are some first steps that someone might want to take if they find themselves there?
The first step is taking assess of all of your debt, everything that you owe. And I know that's really scary. That's the first step, and it's usually the scariest, right? But how do you know? And it's kind of, we put it in sports term or working out. It's like, if you don't know how much you weigh, how can you say, oh, I need to lose 10 pounds, or I need to, gain more muscle? Or you have to have a starting point. And understanding, if you have everything listed down of all of your responsibilities, all of your debt, all your expenses, then you can say, okay, this is going to take me 10, 15 years, right? If you have student debt, if you have a business loan or whatever it might be, and being able to track that often. The reason why you want to do that, because I personally too, there's months where I was like, this is going to take me years. How am I going to stay motivated to do that? Or I can live the lifestyle my family and friends have. However, I don't know how much debt they're in. I don't know how much they have coming in. So I can't compare myself with them. But I can compare myself with how much income I'm bringing in, how much debt I'm getting rid of. And I still remember those moments where I'm like, I'll look at my Excel sheet. I'm very old school in that sense, where I'm like, oh, this is where I was a year ago. This is where I was 5 years ago. And understanding that just a few dollars, $1,000 of getting rid of that debt really made the difference. And you're a lot more hopeful, because there's moments where you just want to give up and be like, you know what, I would rather just live on credit card and no one will know the difference. And I think that's also an issue, right, with social media and what we see every day is people think, I'm very frugal, and I think frugal is actually a good thing because it's understanding, it's being resourceful too. And so I rather use my money in smart ways. So, and what sits with my values as well.
Is there anything that you can teach us or share with us on how to know how to use our money in smart ways? What does that mean, being frugal?
Yeah.
How do I know? Because obviously, if someone is in that situation, they were not frugal.
Yes.
They've made a few missteps along the way. They've purchased things that they didn't have the money to actually purchase. How can we begin to make smarter choices relative to, it makes sense to go into debt here, it doesn't make sense to go into debt there?
So there's one thing that it's more of a myth, and I think it's important to address because that's a really good question. Is oftentimes we think people are in debt because they've overspent their lifestyle. But I talk about the 4Ds a lot, which means you either are dealt with a disease, right? Whether it's your own or someone in your family member, and that's very costly. So they're stuck with the medical bills. There's death, dealing with debt. Like if someone has passed, are you paying for the funeral expenses? How much did you spend prior to that? The other is debt, right? We talk about, it could be student debt, it could be their mortgage, it could be their business debt, it could be personal debt. And last could be a disaster, which we've encountered with pandemics, we've encountered with other things. And so oftentimes I want people to give themselves a break because I've noticed for myself personally and many clients that I've dealt with when they're like, oh my gosh, if I look back at, let's say, a journal in the last 10 years, if I lost a parent or if I lost a loved one, or if I lost a child or whatever death occurred those are the moments where I was making the most irrational decisions about my money. And so when we sit down and say, okay, I'm gonna look at my expenses and see what debt I had. Where am I in this mindset, knowing that it's gonna take some time and I can do it? But kind of going back with what you're saying is, how do we decide what our value is to be frugal? My frugality can be completely different to someone else. I'm not gonna be, I love like thrift stores. I mean, I live in LA, so I have some of the best, stores that I can go shop for hand-me-downs. But I'm not going to tell someone, you know what, if you find joy in, having your coffee once in a while from a nice place or something, then how do you make a list of what is valuable to you, right? What you value. And I think that kind of goes down on the person. And I think we need to ask ourselves, especially when it comes to money. I believe money is one of the most influential energies that we have, and if we don't understand what our values are, we'll make random decisions. So for me, being frugal is just saying, okay, I'd rather spend this money maybe on good food because I have accessible to that, as opposed to maybe really expensive clothes, right? For someone else, they're like, I need quality clothes because of the type of work I have. So maybe I won't eat out as much. I'll plan my meals more often. Maybe someone's really into health. So they're like, I'd rather spend more money in supplements, into gym membership, or whatever would help them to be healthy, and say, I'm not going to spend money on certain entertainment. So it's really kind of figuring out where you stand on what you want, and then understanding that there is discipline that has to work with that. But I think we need to talk more about frugality so people don't see it as such a negative connotation. So people automatically think cheap. I'm like, no, with my money, I donate more. I get to do a lot more things that I love, and help the ones that I love the most. And guess what? It just benefits everyone. So I think that makes a difference.
You help a lot of females.
I do.
The females end up coming or being attracted to your content, to
Yes.
what you're sharing. Why do you think that is?
Ironically enough, when we started doing our podcast, it's still actually a little over 64% male. But when we have most one-on-one with women, I think it's because they see themselves in me. There's some identification. And I think for me early on, I didn't have that. I was lucky that I had great mentors that wanted me to succeed. They knew I'd be probably the only woman in the room, which usually would happen, or the only person of color, or something that obviously I'd stand out, but they knew I could make a difference. And so when I meet women, I meet incredible powerhouses, like women that are changing the world. And they're like, oh, I didn't see anyone that was brown hair, or, just talking about these, they're taboo subjects, let's be honest, right? We're talking about death, we're talking about debt. Really concepts that most people don't want to talk about. They're awkward conversations. And most people tell you I will talk about most awkward conversations publicly now because I wish I would have heard more people talking about it, because then it would have helped me in my situations and things that I had to overcome that I'm like, No one's talking about this. What's wrong with that?
So now you have achieved your financial freedom. You have your understanding of where you are now. You are now into real estate. You mentioned that earlier, right?
Yeah.
With your real estate. Tell me kind of what you see as the trajectory for anybody who's listening that is like, look, I'm struggling with this. I'm dealing with debt. Um, Map us out kind of where, if they're sitting here right now, what should they be envisioning? Where can they end
Yeah.
up? 'Cause they can't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
No,
So
I wouldn't have either.
what would be, tell us like, well, if you do this right, this is where you can end up.
Yeah. So the best advice I got was do in your 20s when no one else is doing, do in your 30s when no one else is doing. That way your 40s and 50s will thank you, right? So don't do what all the 20-year-olds are doing at the time, right? And so my first rental property, I always tell people, was probably the one I made the most mistakes with because I hardly made any profit on it. And this was right before the crash. But I learned so much from it. I'm glad I didn't quit because the next property I made more than double. And it was like, oh, because I learned from all my mistakes and I wasn't afraid to try different things.
Have you ever lost in real estate?
No, I haven't.
Okay, so small wins.
Yeah, and I'm like a
grow-
turtle.
building
Yeah,
on those.
I
Okay.
tell people like I'm like a turtle. I'm like I'm not a flipper. Things that I wish I had the capacity or risk to be able to do that, but I know my anxiety levels. But that's something that I had to learn. Where I'm like, oh, can I invest with a group of people? Am I more comfortable on my own? Is even with getting married when you have a partner, like all these conversations. So someone that's starting out hasn't ever invested. Don't be afraid to prepare yourself a little bit. Go to open houses, talk to people that have invested and successfully too. I got a lot of no's because guess what? The market had just crashed. So a lot of people are like, oh, I've been doing this for 20 years and I lost everything. So like, you're not the person to talk to. I need to talk to someone who's been through crashes, has overcome these things. And I've been lucky that I haven't lost anything, but I also was lucky enough to have people around me that I could ask for advice. And if I were to come across that, I know that it's not the end of the world. It's just how do we fix that? And so your credit's important, right? We talk about that. You said money, it takes money to make money. Somewhat, it depends on the deal, right? But of course, it helps if you have it because cash is king in many instances.
Well, it's going to take, if in that case, it's going to take someone else's money.
Yeah,
But it still takes money.
It still takes
There's
money.
no free, there's no, I'll just give you my house.
No. Yeah, exactly. If you meet those people, please let me know. I know many people would be interested in that. But yeah, sometimes it's just enough to believe that you can try it. And if it's not your jam, find a partner that it's their jam and you have the money and guess what? You grow together. And so I think that makes the difference. So I don't want people to steer away because maybe they had a bad deal once and not get back into the game because there are opportunities. And, we live in a country where there's so many different markets. It's getting educated on and working with the best professionals because I'll tell you, I have a great CPA, I have a great lawyer. I wouldn't be able to do this on my own.
You are writing a book or you have written a book coming up. Yes, you can without a Superman.
Yeah.
Tell me about that. What is that?
Okay, so we ended up changing the name. So funny, no, but I like that you have it, and I know why, because Robert probably put it in that. Thanks, Rob. I love that about that. It ended up becoming the bestseller. It was a children's book, and it's on the take of Cise Puede, which is a very common phrase in Spanish. Yes, you can, and it was kind of my story of how my grandmother influenced me. Didn't have a lot of money, much of any of it. But she knew that there were so many resources within our community that we could make things happen. So I talk a lot about a nonprofit I had for almost a decade and how it changed my life as a young person. And the fact that it was called Cise Puede, I wanted kids to be able to see that and say, you don't need a superhero to change your community. Like you can do this literally with your family, with your friends. And so it was a bestseller on Amazon, which totally hit by surprise. And it was right during the pandemic. So it was kind of
so that one's
beautiful
out.
To see. Yeah, so it's out.
It's called Cise Puede.
So Cise Puede, it's actually Addressed to Remember. So Addressed to Remember is the name of the book. Pero Cise Puede was the concept around it.
How to buy a rental property at a young age.
Yes.
I have that on my list.
Yes.
So that's out?
And that's a quick one. Yeah, everything that we do, or for myself that I've written, I wanted quick content. So everything under 20 minutes, right? So our podcast, Financially Savvy 20 minutes. But yes, that one was for that. For the person that's like, oh, I'm young, I don't know where to start, and what are the biggest questions that I get all the time? I'm like, this is what I wish I would have known. So I put it all in this little book.
I love it. I hope that people that are struggling will get connected with you because I know that anybody who is struggling, and struggling means so many different things.
Yeah.
Somebody could be just mired in debt. Somebody could be doing well financially, but still struggling.
Yes.
And, saying like, is this all there is? Like, what am I doing? Am I making an impact? Am I sure that I'm, navigating this right? Maybe they want to explore real estate and they're frozen because they're struggling. They're like, I don't know what to do next. And there's so many opportunities and offers, and I don't want to lose the money that I have worked so hard to have. And so I hope that they will get in touch with you. What is the best way? Is it through social media?
Yeah, social media, Savvy Latina, and I hope you do connect, because that's one of the things that I think we learn from each other, and being able to start from scratch or redoing it. I always feel like I'm reinventing myself all the time too. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about growth, and so I hope people get to do that with their money as well.
It's super interesting because our previous guest, we were talking about venture capital, talking about billions of dollars. And
Wow.
even after you've made $1 billion, then you're going to ask yourself, what's next?
Wow.
And I want everybody that's listening to know, even if you also are negative, hopefully not $1 billion, but
Yes.
if you're negative, you're still wondering the same question.
Yeah.
What's next? Right? So you connect with Natalie, you find your way out of your current situation, you receive mentorship, guidance, instruction to make better decisions, to receive better outcomes, you find your way out of debt, and then you know what you ask yourself? What's next?
Yes.
So now you then begin to accumulate wealth, and then you have the ability to invest. And I love how you have begun, and I always say this, you can only teach people what it is that you're doing. If you've made $1 million, you can teach people how to make $1 million, but you can't be out there teaching people how to make 10 million. That's what I also love about you and your content is you're sharing your journey very openly, and you're pulling a whole group of people along with you. I super appreciate that about you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate you saying that. It means a lot.
I hope that you will get on the journey with Natalie as well. Make sure that you plug in. She's offering a ton of resources to the entire world. But you will never know that if you don't search her out, find her, consume the content, and of course, you must take action. All right, everybody, we'll see if we can top this week's episode next week. I don't know how we do it, but we'll give it a shot. Don't miss out. We'll be back again with a brand new episode of the None of Your Business podcast.